Slop stories. Slop stories.
Slop Stories presents Milk by Tim DePaola. "This again?" the cashier said as the man filled the entire conveyor belt with soaking wet jugs of milk. "This again," the man said, pulling 2 more gallons out of the cart and dropping them onto the conveyor with a thud. "And let me guess, Yes, paper bags, please, doubled up," the man said with no emotion on his face. The cashier rolled her eyes as she continued scanning the endless gallons of milk. The bag boy's teeth were grinding together as he tried unfolding one of the paper bags to fit it into another. All the while the man continued to slam more and more milk onto the conveyor. After about 8 minutes, the cashier had finished scanning. "All right, sir, your total is $444.50, she said, emotionless as a stone. "Here, please scan this coupon," the man said, handing over a moist, ripped square that had nearly lost all of its colour. She hesitated, seeing it was clearly damp, then reached to take it from his hand. It began to softly come apart. She gingerly and slowly pulled it from his grasp and put it to the scanner. It took a few tries, but once the red lasers finally captured the barcode, the register started beeping incessantly. The cashier's mouth dropped as she watched the screen reduce the price to a mere $10 flat. "Do you have a pen? I only brought my checkbook," the man said. "My manager is on lunch at the moment. We can only accept checks while she is here to validate them. I'm sorry, sir," the cashier said with a clearly condescending tone. "I'll wait," the man said. The cashier leaned forward to look past him at the line forming. Several customers looked at her like starved wolves, furious and ready to leap. "Sir, the line is—" "I'll wait right here until you accept my perfectly fine form of payment," the man said. The cashier pressed her fingers so hard onto the keyboard that the keys began to crack. She looked at the bag boy, who was not even halfway done bagging the milk, his head beet red and covered in sweat. "Fine, sir, I'll accept the check." "I'll need that pen, miss." The cashier's left eye turned bright red as the blood vessels burst. She grabbed a pen out of the cup and slammed it in front of the man. He slowly began scribbling on the drab rectangle. "Date," the man said. The cashier dug her fingernails into her arm. She couldn't tell him. He didn't even ask it like a question. He just said the word date. "Date, miss," the man said again, the pen pressed into the date line on the check, his eyes staring intently down. She blew out loudly and took some deep breaths. She looked at the bag boy, who had just got back from retrieving a third cart to continue packing the milk. He was crying while he quickly rubbed his thumb over a deep paper cut. "Date," the man said again. "It's fucking August 8th, the cashier said with bile in her throat. The man didn't take his eyes off the check, but also didn't begin writing the date. "On second thought," he said quietly, "better wait for your manager after all." She was now beet red, covered in sweat as well. Her fists were clenched so tightly that it would be hard for her to straighten them out. "Fine, no problem. Finish the check and you can wait in the cafe until the manager—" "I will wait right here," he said coldly, the pen pressing extremely hard into the check. During those 30 minutes, the butcher was forced to another register to start ringing up the enormous line of furious customers, and the bag boy passed out in a pile of tangerines. The manager finally returned, boots clacking against the linoleum floors.
"What in the hell is happening here?"
she demanded, spittle flying onto the cashier's face. "Ma'am, this gentleman has been extremely rude and has held up the line beyond belief waiting for you to get back to approve his cheque." The manager stared at her furiously, eye twitching. "You let the store get this backed up over a cheque? You are allowed to accept cheques if I'm not here, especially for—" The manager squinted her eyes while she looked at the screen. $10? Nadine, go wait for me in the office." The cashier looked completely stunned. The man finally looked up from the cheque, tears forming in his eyes.
"Ma'am, she also used foul language with me. She said the F word just because I asked her for the date."
The manager turned her head back towards Nadine. "Forget my office. Wait in the cafe while I cut your final cheque." Nadine burst into tears, sobbing as she ran from the cheque stand. The manager turned back to the man. "I am so sorry, sir. On behalf of Patterson's Grocery, you have our most sincere apology. From now on, you talk to me when you come to this store, and you will have the manager discount for life. For today, I'm voiding out your purchase. This is on us. Why don't you grab a candy bar while you're at it? Would you like help bringing your groceries to the car?" The man gave her the tiniest smile as he took a king-sized chocolate bar. "Thanks, ma'am. Yes, I will take some help." The manager snapped at the butcher, who looked relieved to get taken from ringing up the furious horde of customers.
"Ralph, go get Chuck out of that tangerine pile and bring this man's groceries to his car. And don't just leave them, load them. And don't you dare accept a tip, even if he offers."
Ralph ran to the pile of tangerines and lifted the lifeless bag boy out of the pile, giving him a slap on the face to stir him. They grabbed the man's 3 carts and waited for him to show them to his car.
"Thanks again, sir, for your patronage and patience. And remember, you just ask for me next time you come in. Manager discount," the manager said, quickly whipping her head to the line and shouting, "Next!"
After loading the endless bags of milk jugs into the man's old rusted minivan, the man handed them each $100 bills. The butcher looked up at the pitch-black camera, back to the 100, and back to the camera. He winced and declined the money with a small wave of his hand. The bag boy scoffed and was pulled away by his ear while the butcher scowled. The man got in his minivan, turned on the ignition, and drove away, listening to extremely angry men arguing on talk radio. He blew right through a stop sign and nearly caused a crash as an SUV skidded to a stop before hitting him. He drove for a very long time up a large mountain, until he came to a long wooden bridge. He pulled over at the middle of the bridge, at the apex of its height. Below were extremely jagged rocks. At nearly a 90-degree angle they were almost at the bottom of the mountain. A wicked grin came over his face as he turned back towards his van and opened the trunk. The man started screaming fiercely as he started tossing the milk jugs violently off down the mountain towards the sharp rocks. The jugs began to explode on the rocks, splashing milk high into the air and covering the tops of the rocks completely. The more jugs that burst, the louder the man screamed with delight. Birds flew from the rocks in terror, while mountain lions and other beasts viciously guarded the rocks, waiting for the raining jugs to stop, so they could begin licking the milk until they were gorged on the cream. A pack of coyotes began circling the rocks while the mountain lions roared and began to swipe at them. The man began coughing, choking on his own laughter while tears of joy streamed down his face. After the final jug exploded, he watched for a moment longer as the beasts below began to go to war with each other for who would get to lap up the milk. He composed himself, got into his van, and made a U-turn. He drove down the mountain, face grim as stone, listening to the very angry men argue on talk radio. Thank you for listening. I've been your gentle and true narrator, Simon Hensby. And now for today's memoir of misery.
No.
The taxidermist looked confused as she went over the purchase order, her eyes slowly scanning over the rows of text. She opened the box again and ran her gloved fingers through the tail hair again. So you're telling me they paid to have the tail taxidermied? Just the tail? Job is already done. It's just hair. Should I tie a ribbon on it? I guess I can just tie a ribbon on this regular tail hair and call it a day. The taxidermist took a ribbon off the wall, tied it to the top of the singed tail, and tossed it carelessly back into the box. "Next!" she hollered to her tired-looking assistant.